This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland went to the lane, locked the Mobley, pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Hello and welcome to the Chase Down podcast. I am not Justin Rowan. I'm Carter Rodriguez. Justin has the night off, so you are stuck with my dulcet tones reading your ad reads. Chase Down is brought to you by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract. There's no commitment. Try free at FuboTV.com. Cavs coming off a not so fun outing against the New York Knicks, and to help me break this not so fun loss down and look ahead to a national TV bout with the Lakers on Tuesday is Sporting News' Jordan Zirm. So nice to have you, Jordan. Much better looking co-host than normal.
Oh, thank you, man. That means a lot. I also agree that I look better than Justin. So hopefully, he hears that and he knows that. Yeah, man, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on the Chase Down. You know, obviously I've followed you guys for a long time.
This can't be the first time.
Maybe it's not. I can't remember. I mean, it's the first time coming on this very official with your graphics and your windows and the Twitter handle. So I don't know. It feels like the official first time.
Well, you know what? We'll say it was, and if so, that was long overdue. Obviously, you've been a friend of the pod, even if you aren't a friend of the pod, for a very long time. Let's talk about this Knicks game. Obviously, not the most fun one we've ever seen. We've seen Cavalanches. How about Travalanches? 13 travel calls. I stole that one from Twitter. It's not mine. 13 travel calls. 39 combined turnovers between both teams to 34 combined assists between the two teams. Outside of a stretch in the second quarter where the Cavs kind of made it tight again, where they hit 9 of their 11 shots, they shot 20 of 72 from the field, a cool 27%. What did you see? Was this to you? Was this just a chalk it up weird night and nothing was working kind of night?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the travel stuff is, I feel like we've course corrected entirely. That was insane. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. I don't think I've ever seen players, coaches, fans, everybody just being please stop. We actually would like you to stop calling travel. It's let players travel. So that was wild. Yeah, I feel like the way they came out was just, I mean, you knew it was going to be a sloppy one from the start. It was just brutal to watch. I'm not sure, the energy level wasn't really there.
No, it wasn't.
The shooting was horrific. I mean, there were stretches where I think their offense, they played poorly, but there were also stretches where they were getting shots and they were just missing at the rim. They were missing from three. So this one feels like you ball it up and you toss it out a little bit, especially with, Dean Wade going out and they still don't have Jared Allen. And it just felt like a lazy Sunday performance. And I tend not to try and take too many sweeping observations away from those kind of games.
Yeah, I think lazy Sunday performance feels right. I do think there was the game against Toronto where I thought Cavs played a really, really good game. And they just weren't hitting shots. I don't really think they played a really good game tonight. I mean,
no.
I was kind of running through the box score, looking at everyone's minutes. I'm like, did anyone have a good game tonight? Mobley is the best case. He had 4 blocks. Got 11 and 10 and 3 on not terribly inefficient, but not terribly efficient shooting. It just feels like a game where no one really came super sharp. When they tried hard. And we're really working their butts off to get back in the game. They were cutting at the wrong times. Jetty. I was checking. Jetty only had 1 turnover. It felt like 9 passes went to Jetty where he wasn't in the spot the player thought he was going to be. And, you never know whose fault that is, but it just felt like nothing was sharp.
That one towards the end of the game where Darius thought he was going to cut and threw it and he just didn't, and you're and Darius kind of looked at him don't we do this all the time, what are you doing? So they just felt they were just completely no one was on the same page. A lot of guys were there was a stretch where Kevin Love pulled up for a really bad 3 and Karis LeVert pulled up for a bad. It just felt like everybody was kind of doing their own thing instead of as a cohesive unit, which we saw them in their last game against Philly, which is a which was or I'm sorry, 2 games ago against Philly, which was like an incredible game for them to play. So, it was disjointed, man. I think AC on the broadcast was just like, this game has absolutely no rhythm, and it was spot on. Like that, you couldn't get a feel for this game whatsoever, really, on either side. I think the Knicks didn't exactly play great either. So, it's just a weird one, man. It was disjointed the entire game.
I have two potential takeaways I want to ask you about. All right. Courtesy of the biggest worriers in the world, the people in our Discord. Really just the first one. The second one's a classic Carter Rodriguez angst. But the first one is, this team is now 5-8 on the road. They're 10-1 at home. Like, at what point do we say, like, do we just kind of start dreading road games? And, like, do we just think that's just a byproduct of, like, young team does bad on road? And also, like, they've had really weird injury luck where, like, I feel like they've been more whole at home, when they've had their big home stretches. Like, do you care, I guess, is the question I would ask about a 5-8 start on the road?
I would, like, on a scale of worries, it's fairly low, but I do think it was interesting. Like, before the game started, Bally was running an interview with Donovan ahead of the game where they sort of asked him that, like, you guys have sort of struggled on the road so far this season. And he said something that I thought was kind of interesting, where he was like, we really lean on the crowd at home, and we haven't figured out, like, exactly how to get the energy up on the road when we don't have, like, the crowd into it, and we're trying to take the crowd out of it instead, which I thought was really interesting.
My eye test backs that up.
Yes. Yeah. And then that game happened. You're like, oh, okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I wouldn't say it's like a worry in that, man, they just are like a really bad road team. It just seems like they haven't figured out how to. I mean, I think the energy thing is so big. Like, they just kind of came out, and it's almost like they just sort of expect, like, something's going to get them going, and nothing does. And then all of a sudden they're down 10 points and they're shooting 20% from the field. And then it's really hard on the road to get yourself back into a game like that. So I think, like, definitely a worry. I think that record, like, speaks for itself. And, that Knicks, that's a team you should beat, even with your injuries. Like, that's a Knicks team that didn't play well, and defensively,
they had a bad game. I think they had a bad game.
They had a bad game, and defensively, the Cavs are pretty decent tonight. So that's a team you got to beat if you want to be the quality of team that I think a lot of us think the Cavs are. And whatever reason, yeah. But I thought that Donovan comment was fairly illuminating, that they, like, are just looking for energy from other sources, and they get it at home, and obviously they're not going to get that on the road, and they got to sort of figure out how they can come out of the locker room a little more into it than they have been.
Well, I'll tell you who the biggest dumb idiot of the night is.
Oh, look at that tweet.
And it's Carter Rodriguez. I really thought we were going to see Donovan. I for those listening on audio, I said whatever the prop for Donnie's point total tonight is, I'll be taking the over. Did not hit. I believe it was 27. Someone got in my mentions, said FanDuel had it set at 27. It was a weird night from him too. Like, it felt like, you're right, like, everyone was kind of playing on their own schedule. And there were a lot of plays where, like, Donovan had a really nice look and would dribble into a really hard look. And I don't know if there was a little bit of, like, I think the broadcast mentioned he had a contingent of family and friends there. Maybe he felt, some pressure to put on a show. Maybe he had this idea of coming in with the intention of kind of kicking ass in the Garden because they didn't trade for him like he did in the home game against the Knicks. But it just really wasn't there for him either. Obviously, 23 points on 22 shots, 2 of 11 from 3. Just a weird night from him. I feel like he's had a couple weird-ish games out of the last, like, 3 or 4, and I'm not quite sure what's going on there.
Yeah, me either. I mean, it is interesting. Like, you saw him pregame go up to, Francisco Lindor sitting courtside, and he goes up to him and he daps him up. And then, Jon Stewart in the crowd. I mean, listen, we've got big celebs in the house, Carter.
Listen, I would have performance anxiety playing in front of Jon Stewart. So
absolutely. No, but you're right. I mean, he took a pull-up 3 earlier in the game that just missed, like, everything. And you're just kind of like, yeah, you do sometimes wonder if, especially in that sort of scenario, like, yeah, like, I'm going to go into the Garden, I'm going to try to score 45. I'm going to, I've got friends and family and he's a big Mets guy and we've got a Mets player sitting courtside. So, yeah, I don't think Donovan's had to really, he hasn't done that before. He's just been on the Jazz. And, like, there hasn't really been an opportunity for him to be like, I'm going to prove this team wrong or anything, So it's just very, you do wonder if, like, that just got to him a little bit. But yeah, he's He's been off. I mean, him and Garland have had some bad shooting games on the same night recently, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it's really hard to overcome.
It's. I was just about to say, like, if both of them are going to struggle from the field, no matter how healthy you are or not, it's just going to be tough to win because that's sort of, the team is built on their backs, and then you sort of secondary go to Mobley and Jared Allen. But man, they've just had some really tough shooting nights recently.
Well, and I was saying the other thing about a bad shooting night, and it's quite specifically shooting to me, because
yes.
You look at the rest of this roster, even when they're healthy, they're the only two like bona fide capital S shooters on the roster. Like they're the only, like Jetty when he's feeling it, I think qualifies, but he has not been feeling it for the past month.
No, he hasn't.
Dean Wade, when he's feeling it, has been great. He hasn't been feeling it for the last month. Obviously, he's going to miss time, and we'll talk about that later in the pod. Isaac remains in a pretty slumpy spot after a brief, burst of solid shooting, and even Kev hasn't been shooting well with the broken thumb. So like, you almost need Garland and Mitchell to be darn near 50% from three if you really want to like blow the doors off of teams offensively, especially without Jared out there for easy roll threats.
Yeah, 100%. And I think like you also just need, I mean, alongside with that, you need one of those guys, whether it's like Lamar having a game where he hits 2 to 3 threes, or again, like Jetty, like you said. And I mean, like, I think at this point it's a bit naive to expect like Isaac all of a sudden is going to have consistent 3-point shooting games, but like they need one other guy
on any given night. Like they just need like,
exactly.
Yeah. And if those guys don't have it, it's just really, really hard. Like, I think that this team's shooting talent is not poor, but like they just don't have, even like, in a terrible example because he's shooting terribly to start the year, but like a Reggie Bullock, just a role player who consistently puts up a decent volume of threes and normally is, makes a decent percentage. Like they just don't have that. Even their guys who can shoot like Jetty are just ride super duper hot and super duper cold to get to like a 36% average, and that's hard on a night-to-night basis.
It's tough, and I sort of think, I mean, I think if there was any real observation that I took from tonight, that, and maybe this, can get into some stuff that you had on your mind too, but like, it's just to your point, they just don't, especially when Dean Wade is out, it's just really tough for them at that wing position and sort of guys in the corners to find a consistent sort of 3-and-D threat like that. Because I mean, Diakite is a great story and obviously like he's fun to watch, but like to try and put him in the starters minutes on this team is tough and is not really fair to him. But then, like Lamar, one, he's not really taking a ton of threes, and two, he's not really making them at a high rate. So that's tough. And I tweeted this, but they started both of them together. And like, I mean, it was just the start of the game, the start of the third quarter with that starting lineup was just really tough offensively. And then if you're not getting anything from Chetty, that is where, they just sort of show probably the most troubling spot on the team is that. And it's more glaring when Dean isn't even available. And then you've got Jared out. So you take any offense, he's going to give you out of it. And then it's kind of like, well, where are we getting that third guy that can take some pressure off of Garland and Mitchell? And man, I think tonight, again, I don't want to overreact to anything tonight because like we said in the opening, it was just a tough game, but man, it does sort of highlight that glaring need for that 3-and-D wing. And it's just not there right now.
Well, and like, I think ultimately in a lot of ways, a name that we really should have said by now if things were going well would be Karras, and Karras plays 16 minutes tonight, and another kind of, not super visible outing from Karras where it's like, I don't remember many plays he made other than that 1-3, which that 3 actually I didn't mind because they went way under and it's like, well, what are you going to do? But like, he just really wasn't there, and like, when you're talking about players who are kind of meant to take pressure off of both the stars and the role guys alike, I think that really needs to be Karras. And on the nights where he's playing well, you really feel it. It's like, oh man, this is easy. This is like what they had in mind, and like it just hasn't happened consistently enough. And we talk about this team's rough road record right now. I think a big part of it can chalk up to the fact that role players tend to shoot worse on the road, and like the Cavs and the role players the Cavs should be relying on, like their middle class, so to speak, either hasn't been available or haven't been performing.
Yeah, and I think the Karras thing is a good point. Something that's interesting that sort of happened with him too. I mean, obviously the scoring is way down, but like his playmaking, it just seems like he's having more difficulty like driving and getting the ball to Mobley, to Allen, to whoever. Like he's losing the ball out of bounds or he's throwing it a little bit too late. Like something has just shifted a little bit. And I don't know if the injury sort of threw him off his rhythm completely and he's still struggling to find it back. But even like his playmaking, which I thought was a huge part of his game early on when he didn't have to worry so much about scoring anymore because he had DG and Mitchell. But he had a couple passes tonight. He tried to drive and fit in there under Mobley, and it's going out of bounds or it's bouncing off Mobley's legs because it's low. And it's just like, yeah, like you said, he was kind of a ghost. And that's the plays I remember from him were sort of these like him driving and just missing a fairly easy pass. And it's tough to sort of pinpoint what's going on there, but that drop off has really hurt them kind of significantly, especially as they try to weather some of these injuries.
Yeah, it's not just anecdotal, that observation. In November, he averaged just under 7 assists a game. In November, and he averaged just under 4. So, and obviously there's some opportunity stuff there too. Darius got healthy, and it's harder to rack up assists when you don't get as much on ball time. But yeah, it's just been a little disappointing for him. And while he's not consistently showing up, there's just a huge burden, as you mentioned, on Darius and Donnie. And if both of them have a bad night at the same time, it's not you're not going to have a fun night on the road.
No,
I do want to. I want to move to my second angst point, because I really felt this against the Knicks and against the Bucks. Does this team have a little bit of a hard time playing against some of these really big teams that play drop coverage? Because I felt like Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein really, really bothered both our guards. At one point, Robinson absolutely pelted a Darius floater attempt, and Brook Lopez put this team in quite a bit of pain himself. Do you have any concern about that? You would think that this is kind of the perfect guard backcourt to beat that, because they can just pull from 3. But whether it's Mobley not setting good enough screens to get them enough airspace to beat that kind of coverage, I feel like they're having a hard time consistently generating good looks when teams don't have to go and get into rotation and don't have to help.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation. I mean, yeah, Brook Lopez has had that in hell, and that's been unfortunate. But yeah, I think like even tonight you're watching like some of those. I mean, Garland's gotten really good at really like getting those floaters or those layups really high off the glass. And tonight he was just missing them. Like they were a little too high and they were bouncing off the front of the rim. And there was one point where he just like punched the stanchion because he was so frustrated with like just where the sort of angles of his shots were coming from. So I definitely think there's something to that, in that, both Hartenstein and Robinson are guys that can play that drop and are a little more mobile too. Like they can move their feet fairly well for their size. And I think especially like as we talked about, when those threes are not dropping and like the Cavs are like, okay, well, like let's try to go to the hoop. Like let's try to get something going there. And they can kind of confidently play that drop coverage. And you didn't see a ton of lobs off it tonight either. Like they were really struggling to like get Mobley lobs off of drop coverage, where usually Garland is so good at sort of hesitating until that drop defender decides to come up or lean back, and it just wasn't happening tonight. And I think that's a really good observation in that, because it is now sort of not a huge sample size, but they have struggled recently against that length and against, I mean, even Brook Lopez is more mobile than you might think he is. So I think that is a bit of a concern, because tonight they definitely were like, they're getting the shots up and they were just too hard or too high off the glass. And they just weren't getting the lobs like we're used to seeing. Yeah.
And I think, ultimately, and part of me goes, Carter, if someone else were making this point, you'd roll your eyes like, oh yeah, you had a hard time scoring on the Bucks and then you had one bad night in New York. And that would be a fair criticism. But like, I think kind of what it can bait this team into doing is living way too much in the mid-range, because you have two confident mid-range players in Darius and Donovan, and like we've just seen, this team really starts hurting you when you get teams in rotation. Evan is such an opportunistic cutter. There are other players like Lamar and Isaac can generally, if they're gonna make hay on offense, they'll make hay on cuts off ball, and you just don't get to do that if the guy guarding you isn't not paying attention to you, like, and teams have, both the Knicks tonight and the Bucks in both losses were able to play just straight 2-on-2 defense. And, that's part of why you go get Donovan Mitchell, an elite ISO scorer. But I think they have to find ways to not just take what the defense is giving them and drop. I think sometimes, like, they're so confident in their one-on-one skills in the mid-range that they kind of press. And I think when that happens, that's when we've seen these just like, oh, for 6 minutes the Cavs just aren't going to score. Like, and against the Knicks, you can stay in the game. Against the Bucks, you can go from up 11 to down 26. So I think that's at least tape for them to be reviewing, and I think that they have the personnel to beat this stuff. But ultimately, it is hard when your shooters aren't making shots, because and like even tonight, there were some times where I thought, Darius, just take the three. You're down 11 with 3 minutes left, and they're playing. Hartenstein is dropping under the free throw line. You have to shoot the three, but then the real practicality of the game has to set in at some point, and you have to, and Darius would probably tell you, I wasn't making my threes tonight. I'm trying to get to the basket and find some rhythm. So I don't know. It's early in minor angst. I think I would classify that one as.
For sure. And I think too, part of it is like, I always like sort of watch during games, like, especially when Okoro and Stevens or whoever is out there. Like tonight, like Jalen Brunson was guarding Okoro for a lot of the stretches Okoro was in there. And he's just, he's in the paint. Like, he's not paying attention to Isaac Okoro, and same thing with Stevens on the other side. And like, I thought that also gave the Cavs a lot of issue because they were driving into traffic a lot. Like the paint just was not open. Like it can be when you have some threats like a Dean Wade, or if Chetty's having a night where he's hitting shots and those defenders can't leave their guys and kind of roam the paint. So there was just a lot of clutter too. And I think that sort of played into a little bit of like, not only can you play this sort of drop coverage and they got, they've got size in there and length, but you've got another defender in there because they're just not worried about you kicking it out to Okoro or to Lamar Stevens. And so I think it was sort of like a perfect storm tonight of all those things where, like, not only were Darius and Donovan not hitting their threes when they got open and had those opportunities, but then they're driving, guys aren't hitting shots around them, and the paint is just completely, filled up. So it was I think it was a confluence of all those things that led to the pretty abhorrent offensive night for the Cavs this evening.
Yeah, it just feels like that is kind of the consistent, with the exception of the Minnesota game.
Yep.
Feels like all their losses have just really been when they just can't buy a bucket. And
Sunday, like these Sunday games, I feel like the Minnesota game, I believe, also
was a Sunday.
I don't know what's going on, man. Maybe they're just like, I want to watch Red Zone. Like, why are we playing? And I get that, but it's just like, there's the energy level on Sundays has not been up. It's been me on my couch kind of energy, and I get it.
A quick audit of our Sunday games so far this season. Versus Washington, started slow in that one. Versus New York, they played pretty well in that one. At LA, that first half was a nightmare against the Lakers. Versus Minnesota, they did beat the brakes off Miami on the 20th.
Okay.
So mixed bag. We'll call it. Oh, and then at Detroit, which was another ugly, hideous game. So you might have something there. It's no trend is 100%, but we'll keep an eye on sleepy Sunday Cavaliers moving forward. I do want to talk a little bit more in depth. Dean Wade out. I believe the report was 3 to 4 weeks. What's your level of concern, scale of 1 to 10, just given the current health of the team, current state of the wing rotation? How are you feeling?
Honestly, man, I don't feel great. I think that just Wade's presence, and like you mentioned, like he hasn't been shooting great of late, and he's already had one stretch of injuries as he had to deal with, but like, he just, to me, is a guy that opens up the floor. Like, guys are going to give him the respect from his shot making ability. He's got size, and I don't think he's, I think there's some arguments back and forth about how good of a defender he actually is. But like, he can move his feet and he's got size, and you can at least use him. You can at least try and use him on multiple guys, on some of the other team's best wing scorers. Like, we've seen them do it. And I think just to have that capability to even just absorb some fouls. I think there's a lot of reasons why, like, Dean Wade is one of those very useful sort of Swiss Army guys that can also has the ability to knock down three. And like you said, like, when he gets hot, he's a real game changer from out there. And I think, like, again, back to my point about tonight and one of those observations is, like, when he's out, there's just not they don't have the depth, and they don't really have somebody quite like him that can do the things that he can do. So I'm worried about, like, multiple stretches of injuries for him. And then I am worried that just, like, teams are going to exploit sort of that weakness. And he is a sneaky big part of, like I think I've tweeted this before, but that, like, I would love to see him in the starting five, because I felt like he was when you have everybody healthy, like, you stick him in there at the three, and, like, he's just sort of perfect. And they're not gonna be able to do that for a while. Like, 3 to 4 weeks is fairly significant. So my level of concern is fairly high, just because I think, like, he is just sort of a puzzle piece that fits really well, and they don't have anybody else that can sort of fit exactly what he's doing, even though his shot has been off sort of recently.
Yeah, it's, I feel like the rest of the Cavs wings, to various degrees, kind of do part of what Dean does, but not all of what Dean does. Like, Isaac can D up, I would say better than Dean, but can't provide the spacing. Jetty can sometimes provide the spacing, but doesn't provide the defense or the consistency. Karras is way more explosive as an on-ball scorer, but like I don't know. I feel like the thing with Dean is just, like, Dean is so steady, and with the talent that the Cavs have when they're right, steady gets the job done pretty darn well, like, and the nights where I've been critical of Dean are when he's doing stuff like playing defense with his hands, because, like, Dean, all you have to do is almost nothing. Like, just, you're big and pretty athletic for your size. Just move your feet and keep your hands out wide, and you will do an adequate job, and help will be behind you. Like, I think that is where you really miss it, and, like, you just kind of have to rely. Like, JB's list of dudes he can play just shrinks a little bit. Like, on nights where Jetty and Isaac are having, good games, you don't really notice it. But like I felt like tonight, I don't think Kev had a particularly good game at all. And
no, he didn't. He certainly did not.
and JB was just like, well, I'm putting words in JB's mouth here, but it seemed like JB was like, well, I just got to play him, because Kite didn't have a good game, and it's not like Isaac's playing well. It's not like Lamar played okay, and he got back in a little bit, I think, at the end, but, like, yeah, he didn't really have a ton of choices. And, like, every time you lose a choice of someone to go to when a role player's having a bad game, it just, your margin for error decreases. So I'm relatively concerned, but also, I think my level of concern is almost directly correlates with when we see Jared Allen back.
Yeah.
Like, if Jarrett comes, like, because again, you just lose that margin for error. And since Robin Lopez just has not been playing great basketball as of late, he's just getting sautéed on defense in space as of late. You kind of just have to play Mobley way too many minutes at the 5, which means you kind of sacrifice your identity. There's, like, all these spillover effects when you don't have Dean or Jared out there. So, like, if Jared comes back tomorrow, which obviously on Tuesday, which I'm not really expecting, because he was ruled out, I think, yesterday for this one, so I'm assuming he's not quite close enough, but who knows. If he comes back relatively soon, I'm not super worried. But if you're going without Dean or Jarrett for the foreseeable future, that gets a little tough.
Yeah, and I think too, like, they are just both in, like, how they play and in spirit, they are just, like, Jared Allen really fuels
another steady guy.
Fuels that team. Yes, very steady. You know exactly what you're going to get from him, and so no, I think that's spot on. I mean, yeah, you can just when Jarrett's not there, they are a very different team. Jarrett sort of is the final piece of, like, I think that he makes them go, and he and, like you said, you can move Evan back to the 4. You don't have to sort of sacrifice that. And so yeah, getting Jarrett back in the lineup again. And I think, like, that's been that's been one of the harder things about this season is they just have not been able to have consistency in their starting five, in their rotations. And it leaves, like, to your point, like JB sort of searching, like on a night like tonight, like, well, who am I supposed to play? Like, who else am I going to put in there that's actually going to make a difference? And, when you constantly sort of have these injuries, and then, something to think about too is like, well, then Ricky's going to come back and they're going to have to figure out how to sort of get him into the lineup. So it's a season of change, not only with Donovan coming in and figuring that out, which I feel like has been fairly seamless, but like, with these injuries, it feels sometimes a little bit like last year where they just like could not get a consistent starting lineup for a while because of all the injuries they were having. And that's, I'm sure there's frustrations internally there because it's just like, man, like we've seen what they are when they're healthy and they've got their five out there and what they can do. And we just haven't been able to see it enough.
Yeah, I mean, for one, Jordan, I know this is just the modern NBA. Every team's gone through some pretty major injuries. It's hard to, play the woe is me card too hard. But I certainly was not expecting to see a lot of minutes for Isaac Okoro, Mamadi Diakite, Robin Lopez this season. I did not expect to see those three sharing the floor together while a game was still very much in doubt. So, that's just, it's a bummer that the team's a little banged up right now, but I think that they're just going to have to survive it, and ultimately still 5-9. They're still really, really good. We're talking about a lot of things that aren't going well, and like I keep making sure I hammer this anytime we go into like a prolonged like commentary on things that aren't going well. Like, they're 15-9. They were the fourth best team in the league by record, and I think better by point differential and net rating. While a lot of things aren't going that well, like I think it's super duper promising that like if some of these things resolve themselves, or whether it's health or Kobe finds an interesting acquisition to the roster to help paper over some of these holes. Like, man, that's like, now they're really cooking with gas. So I'm feeling really good. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just to say, like, yeah, it can be hard sometimes to zoom out, especially after a game like tonight where you're just like, man, that was just abysmal basketball and you're frustrated and all that. But like, to your point, like, it absolutely is, like, when you take the zoomed out view, they've also had a really hard schedule. Like, their strength of schedule has been one of the tougher ones in the league. So like, for everything that they've dealt with, for all the injuries, for incorporating a brand new player who's playing on a different team for the first time after a huge trade, like, all in all, this has been pretty great. Like, this has been pretty fun. So I think, with this stuff and with the injuries and how they play, like, hopefully this provides JB with the experience and a roadmap for, like, hey, as we go down the stretch, as I figure out guys' tendencies, because I'm having to play more guys in uncomfortable situations, like, hopefully it becomes a benefit. But yeah, like, they are, by many metrics, a very, very good basketball team. And I think that will, hopefully with we get the bad injury luck out of the way, we get some of the shitty shooting woes out of the way, and they come out on the other side looking like a really, really formidable basketball team.
Yeah, just heading into tonight, just want to note our dear friend Matt Moore, HP Basketball, tweeted that heading into today, no team in the league currently had a top 5 schedule adjusted offense and defense, but the Cavs were pretty darn close. They were at 6 in offense and number 1 on defense, despite missing Darius for a healthy chunk of the early season, missing Jarrett for a healthy chunk of the season, Evan kind of playing his way into shape after the ankle injury to start the year. So plenty of really exciting stuff for this team. And they got a big one on Tuesday. They're on national TV, Jordan, hosting the Los Angeles Lakers and hosting LeBron James. And boy, does it always feel important when LeBron comes to town, right?
It's an event, man. I remember I was at when he first came back as a Laker, and I remember, like, you're walking around before the game, and up there's Maverick Carter, there's Rich Paul, no matter where he goes, it's an event, especially when the Lakers now go on their sort of East Coast trip, which they're on right now. So yeah, man, it's awesome to like have this game where it's just going to be good basketball between the two teams, because the Lakers have all of the sudden sort of turned thing. I think Anthony Davis had 55 and 17 tonight against the Wizards.
I hope he got that one out of the way, man.
Yeah, like, just relax, man. Like, just relax for a second. So they're playing some good basketball. I think they've won like 9 of 11 or something like that. So not only like is it just it's fun for me personally when now to get to see LeBron play the Cavs as he kind of goes to the back half of his career, but like yeah, I mean the Lakers are really trying to get themselves back into the mix of things after a really really tough start to the season for them, and so it's just fun. It's just fun to have like LeBron in Cleveland. He just passed Magic, for all-time assists. Like there's just a lot of fun stuff going on, and to have it on TNT. For everybody to see it, like I think it's going to be a blast. So, but yeah, this is a message to Anthony Davis to just relax. So if he's watching, which I know he is, just please relax.
AD's last 9 games. Ready? I'm just going to read it off. 37 and 18, 38 and 16, 30 and 18, 37 and 21, 25 and 15, 25 and 13, 27 and 12, 44 and 10, 55 and 17.
Cool. That's
oh my
cool. That's
God.
just some average numbers. Really average stuff there.
Wow.
Yeah, that's he's huge. Like you just don't really realize. Like I watch him when he's fully healthy and engaged, and you're just like, this is the biggest man in the NBA, and I don't know what you're supposed to do. And I think he's gotten back to being like, oh yeah, I can just. There's a replay tonight I saw of him just dunking onto, like getting an offensive board and dunking onto Wizards like it was nothing. And you're just like, well, yeah. So maybe that's not the game. I mean, to have Jarrett back would be great, but also like maybe if your back is still a little tender, maybe that's not the night to return.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I think I need to eat a little crow on the Anthony Davis stuff. I've been one of his more. I feel like I have been, if being AD's biggest fan puts you in the 100th percentile, I can't be higher than the 10th. I've been super duper critical of the guy, not like he cares, but man, has he just imposed his will, and like it just feels like this is the stretch. Like the roster around them still kind of stinks, but they look a lot better than they did. And I think like ultimately that was kind of my biggest gripe with just blaming the roster with this Lakers team to start the year. Is like, hey, the whole point is that you have 2 to 3 stars that are at the top of your payroll that carry you on a night-to-night basis, and they weren't doing that. And like now they are, and all of a sudden Lonnie Walker looks a lot better. Thomas Bryant, just being in like an ambulatory NBA center, that helps. Austin Reeves looks a lot better. So like I was higher on the Lakers, even though I was a little lower on AD going into the year, and it feels like they're rounding into form as like at least a 500 level team when they're healthy, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's interesting because living out in Los Angeles, and like you put on ESPN LA out here, they were crushing Anthony Davis since last season. Like they're just being like he's not dominating like we know he can. He's not really like putting the energy into the guy that we know he can be. And now I think like you said, these last 10 games is like what the idea of Anthony Davis and LeBron James is, especially when LeBron was out for that stretch of time. So yeah, and I mean I think Austin Reeves is like a legitimately good role player. Like he's actually, in the Laker games I've caught, like I watched them play the Trailblazers the other night, and like he had like 25 points, and he can hit some threes, and like he's doing a lot of fun stuff. Like again, like you said, the roster is still not the best around them, but when you have a guy like an Austin Reeves who can just like have a game like that, it makes like all the difference in the world. So yeah, I mean, the Cavs are going to have, they played that second half against the Lakers in Los Angeles. They blitzed them. And I don't know I don't think it's going to be quite like that this time around. The Lakers seem to have figured some things out. You've got them at home, which is nice. And the crowd it should be a great atmosphere. But yeah, like you get Anthony Davis going like that. You've got LeBron back and healthy. And then, you're starting to get some contributions. And I do think like they should have done it at the beginning of the year, but like getting Russell Westbrook to come off the bench and sort of play the way he's been playing has also been huge for them, instead of sort of trying to force him into the starting lineup and have him do stuff that doesn't make sense for the team. So they've finally done some things that like make sense from a rotation standpoint. And I think now they've sort of coalesced into something resembling, like you said, a 500 or slightly better team.
Yeah, I think ultimately like it's not just getting Russ off the floor, because obviously he was bad, but it's also like just putting like at least dudes that you got to guard out there, because like the other byproduct, I think a lot of people have talked about LeBron's increased 3-point rate, as a sign of his aging. And sure, like, yeah, as you get older, you're not going to get to the rim as much. But I also think like the roster just did not like there was no way for him to do that with the prior spacing with AD down there, because it's like it's also fair to note AD's jumper has not been in a good shape. Even like he's back to kicking butt as a finisher and as a foul drawer. And so like there was just not enough room for him to operate. And like I think it'll be really interesting. You look at this matchup. I bet if Jarrett doesn't play, which I'm just going to assume he doesn't, because it helps my heart to assume he's not going to play. I don't want to get my hopes up and have them dashed. Is it Lamar on LeBron to start and Mobley on AD, and you just kind of do your best?
I think so. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they threw some doubles at AD and sort of just are like, let him kick it out to anybody but LeBron and figure it out from there. Because, yeah, I mean, like the size difference in AD, and I'm not even talking about height. I'm just talking about like thickness. Girth from AD and Evan Mobley is going to be tough, especially without like Jared Allen to sort of rotate over and help. So, yeah, that sounds right. But I would not be shocked if they sort of mix in some double teams to just try and like not let AD get going early, because I think when that's been the thing about these last few games, like he starts getting going and feeling good in a rhythm, and then he just has been absolutely exploding. So yeah, I mean, it's gonna be tough, man. When he's playing like this, like you remember like who Anthony Davis is and why he was so coveted. Like he's a really, really good player.
Yeah, and I feel like he's really kind of rediscovered that like his buckets don't have to come via ISO, when he just slips to the rim. Like, he doesn't even have to, like, crash hard. He just, like, start his body in the direction of the hoop while the pass is on the way. And he can generate a good outcome, like, 10 times out of 10. Like, when he faces up and dribbles and tries to, like, show off his, like, bag, I feel like that's, like, the worst-case outcome. And to me, like, it makes him so much harder to guard, because you go into this matchup and you almost wonder, like, do you just do what you did against the Sixers? And just kind of blitz and show a lot of weird help looks to kind of keep the ball out of his hands. And I don't know how well that's going to work given how well he's moving. Like, he's going to high point the ball at his spots, and it's going to be hard to take it away from him. I think if I'm guarding him, I do think hard traps. I think the one thing that AD's game never really developed is as a playmaker. Like, he is still a guy who isn't going to average more than 2 or 3 assists a game. He's not a guy who's going to, play chess on the floor offensively. I think you just want to throw bodies at him and make him see stuff and make him make some relatively hard passes. But man, it's going to be hard work. The Cavs, I think, are going to have to score in this game.
For sure. I think like something interesting the Lakers have been doing recently they've been running like a LeBron AD pick and roll, but like at the free throw line instead of like further out. And it's just like allowed AD to just like be at the rim whether he's rolling.
The second he moves.
Exactly. And that's been a huge help for them. So I think like also to your point, like getting them to start that pick and roll further from the basket. If the Cavs can sort of attempt to like push him out a little further, whether it's like subconsciously or not, just get them to start it further away from the basket will be big, so that then like they can throw stuff at him, they can get in his vision. But if he's already catching the ball down there, you're toast. So not to interrupt, I'm sorry, but the other thing that AD does better than most is when you do lean on him too hard, that man will spin move you into an easy lob. With the quickness. So you're right. I do think being as physical as they can and just like see if you can bait them into starting that pick and roll a couple feet further out than they want to, because they don't want to deal with fighting you. Like that's the kind of stuff. Like so much of defense, like I feel like people think about the schematics and they think about some of it's just being annoying enough to like get them to start their action a foot further out than they want to. And I think that's the kind of stuff you're going to do. Who would you start in this game? Would you roll the same starting lineup you had so you have extra size to help, or would you maybe, I don't know, try to inject some shooting? I mean, like, I think like I don't think they can run out the 5 that they ran out tonight, even if it adds some extra size. I think you have to have one of those spots at the 3 or the 4 be somebody who can shoot, like, or has the threat of shooting. And I don't know if like starting Jetty is the right move or not. But I think like what's happened to the Cavs recently is like their offense hasn't quite been good enough. I think their defense has still been pretty good. But you look at like something like tonight, and their offense was the reason that they lost this game. And so I think like I would think about trying to put more shooting in that starting lineup, because I just don't think you can have like Lamar Stevens plus Diakite or plus Isaac Okoro. Like I don't think that is a tenable starting five, even if you feel like, okay, well, we can lean on it defensively. We can really muck stuff up, and hopefully Darius and Donovan have a better shooting night, which like I can see that line of thinking. I just think like teams are going to really start to exaggerate how they sag off some of these guys, and it's going to get worse the longer the Cavs kind of have to like roll out these lineups. And I might shake it up a little bit, because I just think they need to have that shooting threat that's out there. So I might lean that way. Where are you at?
I don't know, because you can get really weird and put Kevin Love in there.
Okay.
And
it could get weird.
And just say, Kev, guard one of these Lakers guards that just run around and sometimes can shoot, whether it's Beverly Schroeder or Lonnie Walker. Walker, I would think he would be a really rough matchup, just given how athletic Walker is. The other guys, and here's the thing that you might, and speaking of some defensive chicanery, maybe you just say, hey, we actually don't mind if Dennis Schroeder goes ISO a lot in this game, and we're gonna give him a seemingly tasty matchup. And not help as much as you might think we should, and see what happens. I think you could junk it up a little bit like that. I don't mind the starting lineup and just say, hey, Donnie and Darius, you're just gonna have to make more shots. If those two shoot better tonight, you have enough offense to win the game.
It's a different story. No, I think that's totally fair. Like I think if Darius and Donovan sort of regress back or egress, whatever, I don't know what the term is, to go back to the mean after they progress from the mean.
Regress.
Okay,
and you know what?
Either way, great.
Quick sidebar: someone in the YouTube comments last pod came after my dear co-host Justin Rowan for saying for talking about positive regression. They said it's progression when it's positive. I said, no, not so fast, my friend. I looked it up. It's regression in either direction. And my buddy and dear friend Justin Rowan was right. And you know who else is always right? Jordan, our dear friends at Zoom. Support for this podcast and the following message come from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, and workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Jordan, I almost forgot to get the ad read in. Had to sneak it in while I was already monologuing.
I mean, absolutely elite transition into that ad read.
Oh, thank you. I'm doing my best Rowan impression.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah, because I was searching for what other word to use outside of regress, and I was like, I don't think there is one. So
positive regression.
Positive regression.
It can happen.
It can happen. So yes, if they get back to shooting closer to their averages, it will feel a lot better. And maybe that's where they go. Maybe they, I feel like JB often leans like, how do we play this better defensively than how do we play this better offensively? So like, when you're coming in against a Lakers team, maybe you do get weird. Maybe you do. I'm into the Kevin Love thing, who, is hopefully has a better shooting night than he did tonight. So yeah, maybe they get weird. Maybe they junk it up. Maybe they throw random bodies on positions you're not expecting and get the Lakers out of their actions a little bit. So
here's the only other counter I'll make for keeping the same starting lineup. It would be devastating, Mr. Zirm, if Evan Mobley picked up 2 fouls in the first 5 minutes of this game.
That's correct. That's very true.
So I think that realization has made me go, let's roll Diakite out there. Let him take a couple hits to start this one out.
And defensively, Jetty would probably. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. This is a group that you would expect Jetty, that point guard trio. You would expect him to be able to do an okay job on that.
You would hope so. One would hope. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I always kind of lean towards like the extra shooting a little bit, because I think like the spacing just makes such a big difference for them. But I do see where you're coming from, and I do see how like they could just kind of decide to go, yeah, let's keep Evan. Let's try to protect Evan a little bit and throw some bodies until it's time where we got to make some rotation changes.
Yeah, it's going to be a certainly a tough game, a tougher game than we probably thought it would be a week or 2 weeks ago. But I'm very excited for it too. There is something about a national TV game, and this is a very inside baseball Cavs diehard kind of take. But our only national game last year was on ESPN. Our first game of the year was on ESPN. It'll be kind of fun hearing like Barkley and the crew. Like I think if there's any indication that I still value what those guys say, it's like I want to hear them talk about my team, and kind of deep dive a little bit, like their thoughts on what this team's bringing to the table, and that's just like a special little treat over the course of the year. I don't know. Plus, like everyone's gonna like people act like national TV doesn't matter anymore. The timeline tells me otherwise. Most people are tuning into that game if it's on.
Oh, absolutely. There's still something about a TNT game, man, that feels big, especially when you've obviously got the LeBron Ohio connection, the former Cap stuff. Like LeBron will probably write something on his shoes about Akron or about Cleveland or whatever. Like there's always like a little bit extra there. I can't wait to hear Shaq not know half of the Cavs rotation players while he's trying to talk about them on the halftime show. Like that's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, no, I mean it's like, we grew up like being used to the Cavs being on national TV and TNT all the time. And when you don't have it for long stretches, it's weird. And so it's always now a little bit fun to get one of them back, especially in a matchup like this, where like people love to talk about the Lakers. People love to watch the Lakers. No, even if they're, for most of the season, they've been really difficult to watch. So like, no, I think it's going to be a ball. And I think like, again, that atmosphere at the field house should be pretty great.
Isn't it kind of nice I feel like the energy when playing LeBron has shifted so much over the years. Like it started out, LeBron comes to town, and obviously that's one of the most infamous games ever. Virulent anger, not something that I think a lot of Cavs fans are super proud of looking back at it. And then it moves into like this just big brother, just sunning era where he's just kicking your ass over and over and over again, and it's not super fun. He always, even if the team he's on isn't good, he makes sure to get up for that game. And I feel like this game, I felt it a little bit last year, but this is almost the ex-girlfriend at the 10-year reunion energy. Like you want to show her that you turned out okay. You landed a good gal yourself, but it's not like negative. You're not like you don't have malice in your heart while you're showing off your new life to your ex, but you still have a little bit of like I want to show her that I turned out. I turned out well. I think that's the vibe I feel going into this game.
I like it. It's like you're like, hey, I bought this home. It was a bit of a fixer-upper, but man, I've really turned it into something special. And like, I have friends over all the time, and they're really complimentary of it. It's really great. But even on a more serious note, like it's an appreciation now. I feel like there's an appreciation of him. Whereas, like you said, there was booing him every time he touched the ball. Now it's sort of like if he throws down a big dunk, people are going to stand up and go nuts. Like that is so much preferable to what it used to be. And I'm glad that I'm thrilled that like we're at a point now where people can just, when he comes to Cleveland, can watch him live and appreciate like what he's still doing at his age. So that is also a very cool part of this is like watch him and appreciate him and applaud him when he's doing things. And I think that's a much more fun way now to watch LeBron than it was obviously when he left for the first time. So I think
stressful.
Oh my God!
Like I'm excited for this game on Tuesday. No matter how it ends up, I'm not stressed about it. Like there's no referendum on anything, and that's a nice change.
Absolutely, I think it's a really good point. It's just like he came, we got the ship, he left. Now it's just now we can just enjoy it. Like just enjoy playing him on national television.
Absolutely. Well, I will take no more of your time, Jordan Zirm. Thank you so much for joining. Anything you'd like to plug? Obviously, over at the Sporting News. Anything you wanna sell before we leave?
Yeah, I've got a weight loss plan.
Oh wow!
No, brother, I'm kidding. I certainly don't. No, I mean, thanks for having me. Yeah, follow us at the Sporting News. both on Twitter and Instagram. I think we're doing some fun stuff there. And just follow me. I've made some TikToks about the Cavs recently, Carter. This is a thing that I've done. I don't know how I feel. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know if I feel great about it, but I'm doing it. So if you want to follow me on TikTok, my handle is @Cleveland Zirm. It was my old Twitter handle, so you can find me on there as well. So I mean, don't tell everyone that I'm on TikTok. Like, I don't know if I want that to be, a hugely public thing, but I'm there. My face is on there. So.
Listen, I'll tell you what, my algorithm is finely curated at this point. I'm scratching every itch with that thing.
What's your top? Like, what top category what are you getting on TikTok? What's the first video that's popping up for you?
I'll tell you one thing. I actually had this thought today. It's not like at anywhere near the top, but the thing I will always like within, with like this really optimistic, like, oh, I'm totally going to take this and use this is Excel tips. Where people are like, this idiot coworker was doing this function, but here's the real function you should do. And every time I go, holy crap, I didn't know you could do that in Excel. And then I'll like it, and then I never look at it again and never do the tip.
That's how TikTok was meant to be used, baby. It's not.
It is not a personal growth platform.
No, I like that Carter is deep into Excel spreadsheet TikTok. This is huge news.
It's not high in my algorithm, but I liked another one today. I was like, why am I doing this? I'm never going to use this thing.
Oh, man, that's the best thing I've ever heard. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Well, I think now is as good a time as any to end this thing. So thank you so much for joining, Jordan. And to our listeners on YouTube, our listeners on audio, thank you so much for supporting the pod. If you are on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like button and make sure you're subbing to the Cavs YouTube channel. If you're listening on audio, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe. Help cook those books and exploit that faulty algorithm. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, go Cavs.